like everyone, I suppose, it's been a real shock to the system. I've had to just sort of stop for a minute and think, right, I'm at home. This is the situation, right? This is what's going on. There's nothing I can do about it. Actually, do you know, the first couple of weeks back in March, I loved it, sort of being in my own bed and, on the sofa, watching Pose, I really, really, I really made the most of being just at home. And then a couple of weeks in, you sort of start getting itchy feet, don't you? Feel, I really fancy going to work, or I'd love to be doing something really exciting.
And what do you miss the most? I mean, a lot of people are saying, oh, I miss going out, hanging around with my friends, going to the pub. But you mentioned there you miss work. I mean, I've loved your documentaries ever since you started doing them. And we were both on BBC Three at the same time back in 2008.
Yeah, you were there before me.
I'm an old fossil.
No, pioneer.
Oh, thanks. But Blood, Sweat and T-Shirts back in 2008 was your first one when you've sort of thrown in at the deep end as a participant in a documentary. Did you ever think back then, I mean, did you get a taste for it back then and think, this is what I love to do, this is my work, this is where I feel most comfortable in?
It's so funny, isn't it? I know, it was a complete accident. You're right, I was a contributor. So I was like 19, 20, and I'm 34 in March. So I've been doing it for like 14 years now. But yeah, it was only ever meant to be a one-off. And, we went to India and had like the most remarkable time, learned loads, and just loved the filming, loved meeting people, loved the entire process. And then that was when Danny Cohen was in charge of Free. Do you remember?
He was our boss, yeah.
Oh, he's such a gent. Like, really, he has made such an impact on my life. Because then he said, oh, do you fancy doing your own gig, And then it just sort of escalated from there. So it was a total accident. Just really fortunate, sort of right place, right time. And still doing it.
And you're still doing it. But now, I mean, but it's amazing because the documentaries that you have been doing, I mean, I've got to take my hat off to you, Stacey, because you've gone into war zones. You have gone, I mean, apart from the geographical places that you've gone, which are challenging to say the least, you've also been dealing with some incredibly delicate subjects. And I kind of want to talk about that a little bit. I remember, I've got this image of you, which I'll never forget. It was one of the documentaries you did back in 2017. And it was about the Japan exploitation of young sex, basically.
Yes. Yeah.
And I remember you talking to a very large man in a shop and basically asking him, what is the deal with young women in the sex market in Japan? And I thought the nerve and the courage that you must have had to stand there, and you didn't seem at all fazed by it. How do you prepare for interviews like that?
I don't know if it's courage, it's probably stupidity. But I like that it comes across like that. I don't know, I guess, I mean, I recognise what a privilege it is to be able to travel for a living, right? And just meeting all of these people that you wouldn't normally go about with day to day. But, sometimes people are nervous to ask questions in such a candid way. But I think really that's the best way to approach these things, because then everyone's on the same page and you know what you're talking about. And often they'll, as long as you're sort of respectful, I think often they will sort of honour you with an answer. Yeah, it's really tricky when you're talking about young girls and exploitation and, you're sort of creeping into that territory, because actually you need to call it out for what it is at times, Exploitation is exploitation. They'll sort of dress it up as something, but that's what it is.
Have there been moments where you've been genuinely sort of scared of
Oh, totally.
Really? Because I know you've got a huge trust with your team, and in social media you talk about your team and how connected you all are and how you trust each other, which is really important in documentaries. But have you found yourself in a situation where you thought, maybe we shouldn't be here?
Oh, loads of times. I've done it loads of times. And every time I sort of have, like, internally, I have an argument with myself. I think, well, Stacey, you voluntarily got on the plane and, you fought for this commission and you really wanted to cover this story, and now you're here and it's all going to go wrong. I've been on the front line a couple of times and I've loved meeting the people that I have, because, for example, I've been to Iraq, I think 3 times. I've been to Iraq 3 times. I've been to Syria, and the people are just so impressive. Like, I hung out with the Yazidi girls. They're just so principled and so dignified and such beautiful girls. You're there and you're hanging out with these people, and then there'll be, an attack sort of 2 kilometers away, and then you're suddenly, it's all very sobering again. So it's such a surreal way to earn a living, but I love it. It's wicked, and I don't think I would do anything else, actually.
How do you choose your subjects? Is it something that comes from within you? Is it something that you discuss with your team? How do you decide
Yeah,
what you're going to
it's
do
kind of,
next?
certainly at the start, the channel would come to me and say, "Oh, we find this really interesting, or we'd like to explore this field. Is this something that excites you?" And I was much more of a presenter, so I would sort of turn up and, interview people. I'd be on sort of on the ground for a couple of weeks and then leave. Now I'm much more involved in pre-production, so sometimes I produce, or I'll sort of be involved with the recce, and we'll go around for a couple of months and meet different people. And so now I go to the channel and say, are we happy to explore this, or what don't you want to, what have you covered a lot of this year? So yeah, it's lovely. We've got a really lovely working relationship, actually. I feel really fortunate.
And let's talk a little bit about the travel that you do. Obviously, because of the pandemic, you haven't been able to do that. Are you feeling that sort of need to leave the country to go and experience new things? Because most of the people I speak to who travel for their jobs, it becomes like an addiction. They need to experience those different cultures and those different areas and travel.
I love traveling, and Asia. I would say Asia is probably my favorite part of the world. I feel, this sounds really cheesy, but I feel really alive. Like, I feel really excited about everything. And of course, every now and then you sort of get the ump, or you think, oh, I'm so over this. But then you've really got to sort of bring yourself, you need to remind yourself that actually, given what's going on, I am really lucky. You know what I mean? Like, I haven't lost anyone, and I've got my house, and I'm not panicking about food. So I do understand. Like, I do try and practice gratitude, but every now and then I'm thinking, God, John, man, the last push. It feels now like lockdown 3. It really does feel like the last push, and we have got reason to be cautiously optimistic because we have got this vaccine. So I do hold on to that. But I can't tell you the day I'm allowed to get on a plane and just, Heathrow will feel so exciting, duty free will feel so exciting, security will feel so exciting. I'm going to be skipping through.
Now, one of the times that you didn't travel around in your career was when you did Strictly. We've got to talk a little bit about Strictly.
Strictly.
And I mean, how did you find it when they asked you? Did you think, yeah, I'll have a go? Or did you think, oh, I'm not sure? What were your feelings when they asked you?
Well, I always said Strictly is the only one I'd do out of, the reality celebrity competitions, because I think it's such a beautiful show, and I really feel like it's so classy. It doesn't seem to tire, like, it's aged so well. We're on series, I think, 18 or whatever now, and still, 12 million people every Saturday. And I think it's total escapism. My mum loves it. She goes around her pals and they get a takeaway, and, they're rooting for their faves. And I just think it's real feel good. So when they sort of floated the idea, I was saying, God, yeah, it sort of allows us to be at home for a couple of months, and, we can sort of switch off. And I think I'd been doing quite intense stuff pre-Strictly. And I said, yeah, why don't we go for it? But you know what it's like? You never think in a million years you'll be in for longer than a couple of weeks. So you're trying to plan your diary. So you start in September, and, we were thinking, well, sort of late October, we've got a gap until Christmas. What we're going to do then? Because I just thought, well, I'm not going to be about. And then I just loved it. I fell in love with ballroom.
And it's a lot of work. I mean, I know
Yeah,
it was a while ago back now, but what I thought was exceptional about you and pretty much every participant who you see, everybody works really hard and they do take
yeah.
it really seriously. But you definitely had, you could see you had that bug from week one.
I found the whole thing so exhilarating. Like, the learning to dance felt like such a treat. especially like some of these dancers are like the best in the world, so you're dancing alongside world champions.
Now, you ended up taking your dance partner home, Kevin.
I did, yeah.
Uh,
That was such a cliche. So cheesy. I can only apologise.
Have you guys been dancing during the lockdown? I mean, we've seen everybody who's sort of been doing their sort of, their Joe Wicks workout or going out for a jog or something. Have you guys sort of been doing dance drills or something? That's what I'm picturing. Go on, don't spoil it for me.
Well, yeah, no. Do you know what the funny thing is? I love dancing around the house, so I'll always have the music on. Tina Turner or Gloria Estefan, Dolly Parton. I've always got music on, and I'm like, Kev, come on, let's have a dance. Let me show you my frame. Let's do a bachata. And Kev's not asked. He's sort of. He has to be tempted away from a podcast, or he'll be watching something quite intense. So I feel like unless he's being paid to dance, he's not that forthcoming.
Because he's a professional. That's why.
He's less infused than me. I think, every now and then he'll entertain me, but he has to be really encouraged.
Yeah, that's his job. He's like, right, pay me and I'll dance. Yeah. It's like me going, go on, Stace, do an interview for me. Go on, I love him. Go on, do an interview just on the side.
But look, Kev, he's got such patience.
Speaking of interviews, let's go back to what you do and what you do brilliantly, and what your passion is in doing. And as you said, you've been doing it for 14 years. Your latest documentary, because it deals with something that many, many, many people are dealing with right now, which is mental health during the pandemic. So the latest documentary that you have been filming is called Back on the Psych Ward. What can you tell us about it? Because you're revisiting ground that you went to, this, I believe, is Springfield Hospital, which you did a previous documentary at, and now you've gone back. Why did you go back?
The first documentary that we made at Springfield was really well received, actually. And I think, the topic, it just resonates with so many people. We all know someone that's been poorly with their mental health, or there have been issues or hurdles that they've had to overcome. And it's difficult territory to get right. You think about genuine consent, and when people are psychotic or they've been dealing with schizophrenia, it's difficult to work out whether or not they truly want to be involved. So it means the way that you normally film goes out the window. You really have to invest in relationships, and you're sort of back and forth with the healthcare professionals, and you're doing that for months before you even pick up the camera. Typically, when you make a documentary, you need verbal consent, written consent. Here, with something like this, the consent is rolling, and then whenever they feel like they don't want to be a part of the production, they can pull out, and we totally honour that. And that happens on both films, which is totally fair enough, because we have to make sure that everybody wants to be involved. Anyway, the first film, I think it was the most watched film we'd had since 3 went online on iPlayer. And actually, do you know, I do a book tour, this really beautiful story. And we were at the Barbican, I think it was the last night, whatever, there's like 2,000 people in the Barbican, and we were talking about this film. And this young girl, total sweet, I put up her hand in front of all these people and went, I watched the Springfield film, and I just wanted to say, I'm delighted that, you were talking to people. Just because we're ill doesn't mean, we don't deserve to be heard. I myself was a patient. I was a patient at Springfield, and I've come out the other end, and everything's feeling much brighter, and everyone clapped it. It was such a wicked moment. So we went back, and obviously COVID has played out, and just spoke to the staff, and they were saying, it's always been really difficult for obvious reasons, but then you throw a pandemic in the mix and it just exacerbates everything. People are really struggling. People are struggling because they haven't got their routine. They're lonely. It was a real eye opener. Really interesting.
What did you notice as the differences between your first visit and your second visit? Obviously, the pandemic was on, but yeah. What visually, what did you see that was different when the pandemic was affecting the hospital?
I think the obvious difference was of the staff on the first film, so tactile, really sort of compassionate, real sort of always displaying empathy. And obviously, when you've got COVID, you can't do that. It's really important that you've got that distance, and you can't give them a hug, or you can't squeeze their hand. So I think the staff, that sort of, they really have to wrestle with that. And I think as well, just there's so many people that need help, and the NHS, of course, are utterly brilliant, but they can only do so much. And I spoke to one guy, Dr. Hughes. He was meant to retire, so we sort of said our goodbyes on the first film, la la la. Then we got back to do the second film. Dr. Hughes is still there, and I'm like, I thought you were retiring. He's like, so I think I've been gone for about 12 hours, and then I got the phone call saying, will you come back? And they're just, they're so selfless, aren't they?
And have you seen? I mean, because you've been looking into mental health for your films as well. Have you had any pointers as to how the pandemic has affected the mental health of young people? I mean, we read that 1 in 4 experience mental health issues by their 18th birthday. Do you think that this pandemic is really sort of going to explode those numbers, unfortunately?
I mean, I'm always cautious because I know I'm not a professional, but from the conversations I've had, I think they say, I mean, it certainly hasn't helped. And I think, people had pre-existing conditions, and they've become unwell again.
Right.
And then we've got people that have never had any issues with their mental health before coming and presenting themselves for the first time. So there's just so much to contend with, and there's just so much to deal with. And I think, if you've got, if you've like delusional psychosis, for example, pre-COVID, somebody might have thought, God, the world is going to end, and they would have a tendency to catastrophize. But then COVID comes on the scene, and it's like, well, no, actually, these are sort of totally legit concerns. And you've got the Prime Minister at 5 o'clock every day saying how awful everything is, So that's what the staff were saying. It's really hard to differentiate between what was legit and what was speculation.
And I'm looking here that you also spoke to someone with OCD that was at the hospital. And it's strange. My daughter's in secondary school, she's 14. There's a few kids as young as 14 that are experiencing OCD. And I was just amazed you're featuring this person who's 21 and they have dealt with OCD from a very young age, of how serious OCD can get.
Yeah, it can be totally debilitating. It can be so crippling. We met Ali, really, really lovely girl, really brave, and really honest. And she's been in and out of the system for years. She's struggled with OCD for a really, really long time. And when we approached the OCD ward, they said, look, we're really happy to have these conversations, but what we don't want to do is follow a lazy narrative or a lazy stereotype that everyone that suffers with OCD is just obsessed with cleaning their hands. And Ali's great at describing how the rituals take over her life. So with OCD, you can struggle with something, but then you tell yourself that if you adhere to these rituals, it kind of cancels out what could potentially happen.
Yeah.
But these rituals can take hours and hours and hours. So you find yourself just going through these rituals, and that's the entire day gone.
Stacey, when are we going to see Back on the Psych Ward? When's it going to be out?
I think it's coming soon. You have to keep an eye out on iPlayer. We haven't got an exact date, which is obviously really helpful for you.
But it's coming soon.
It's coming soon. It's coming soon.
I've got to ask you one more question, which was, it's now Stacey Dooley MBE.
That's right. Yeah, so fancy.
So fancy. How did you feel when that happened?
Oh, do you know, it's a really funny story. So I came home, and there was a letter on the, through the letterbox, and I was like, what's that? And it was from, I don't know, Her Majesty's da 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 da. And your first thought is, have I paid my tax bill? Your first thought is, I'm sure I've done my self-assessment. So that was my first thought. I thought, oh, I'm in trouble. And then I opened the letter, and I was like, oh no, actually quite the opposite.
Well, Stacey, look, thank you so much. It's been great to chat to you after so many years. It's been great to have a chat again. And I so much look forward to what you're going to be doing next. I love your documentaries,
Thank you.
And I look forward to what you've got planned in the future. Stacey Dooley, thanks for giving me your time.
Oh, no, likewise. Thank you ever so much.